Hi, this is FM Viktor Neustroev, and this is the third video devoted to the best player of all time. And in this video I'm going to introduce Garry Kasparov. I'm sure many of you would say that Garry is the best chess player of all time. Let's learn something new from Garry's chess life and observe his second best game. Why second? Because I've already made a review of the best game of all time, and that was the game between Garry Kasparov and Vasily Topalov. And one more thing before we start, my previous video was devoted to Bobby Fischer, and I was asking you what else Bobby invented for chess. Would you like to know the answer? Please watch this video to the very end and you'll find the answer later. Okay, before we start the analysis of Garry Kasparov's game, let me tell you about his biography. Actually, Kasparov is the last name of his mother. When Garry was born, his full name was Garry Kimovich Weinstein. However, he decided to change his last name at the age of 12. Garry's parents liked to solve chess puzzles published in Soviet newspapers. And at the age of 5, Garry suggested a solution to one of them. And since that moment, his father started teaching him chess. Nowadays, Garry is also known as a writer and political activist. But of course, chess made him popular. At the age of 22, he became a world champion in 1984, defeating Anatoly Karpov. And from 1984 until his retirement in 2005, Kasparov was ranked number 1 for 255 months. And he achieved a peak rating of 2851. However, then Magnus Carlsen surpassed this rating in 2013.
Here I would like to show you the second best game played between Garry Kasparov and Simon Palatnik. So this is the second best game by Garry Kasparov. At that moment he was quite young. He was playing with white pieces and e4, knight f6, e5. So this is elegant defense. Knight d5, d4, d6, knight f3. This is what I usually play against elegant defense. So this is quite a good opening. g6, quite a rare move. Garry replies with bishop c4, and not only with the idea to gain a tempo, because he actually didn't gain it, but to keep the bishop on this diagonal. a5. Here e6 can be played, but actually a4 is a more solid continuation. Bishop g7. By the way, what do you think about Bishop g4 in this position? Is it a good move or not? Well, okay, the answer is definitely not, because if they play this move, we capture on f7, attract the king, and then play knight g5 check. And after the king moves back, for example, we capture on g4, so we gain a pawn with this combination. Okay, Bishop g7 was played. Knight g5, attacking on f7, e6, to close the diagonal, and Garry plays f4. His idea is to open the king side. He actually wants to open the f file as well. This is what exactly happened in the game then. c5. Black tries to undermine the center. And of course, c3 should be played. Garry castled. That was kind of an inaccuracy, because queen d4 could lead to a good position for black. C takes d4, knight f7, no, sorry, not rook f7, this is a mistake, knight f7, but then he can just castle. Then knight d6, knight h6 looks like a better option, but anyway, it's a playable position for black. There is no advantage for white at all. Approximately equal. So, but Palatnik didn't use this chance. Instead, he castled, and then Garry realized that he made an accuracy, and now he plays c3. Even here, it was better for black to capture on d4, but knight c6. Knight e4. with the idea to occupy the f6 square. So bishop g5, bishop f6, or knight f6. Knight d7. So now f6 is protected. That's why Garry plays just bishop e3. For example, bishop g5 didn't really make much sense. Then queen b6, knight f6 check, king goes to h8, rook f4 to support the central pawn, c takes d4, rook h4, bishop f6, then bishop f6, knight f6. That's why it's better to capture with the pawn, but looks like white is stuck with his attack. King h1, queen c5. So the bishop on g5 is attacked, and if the bishop moves, then the f6 pawn dies. So that's why bishop g5 didn't make sense in that position, so bishop e3 was played instead. Knight e7. So black wants to defend the king. Bishop g5. C takes d4, c takes d4, h6 to chase the bishop, bishop goes there, g5, but it only weakens the king side. Bishop f2. Oh, it could make sense to sacrifice a piece on g5, for example, bishop g5, h takes g5, knight takes g5, with the idea to play queen h5. But in this position, knight e5 could be a strong move, and if queen h5 now, then queen d4, check, king goes there, and queen d3. This is how h7 square is protected. Maybe there was a line where white could improve and still get the advantage, but Garry decided to play a more solid move, bishop f2, keeping in mind that h6 and g5 will be just weaknesses. I mean, not these pawns are weaknesses, but these pawns weaken the king. They expose the king. So knight g6, knight b to c3. So now the last minor piece joined the game. Queen e7, bishop c2, b6, bishop goes to e3 to open the file and also get the control over the diagonal. Now no knight f4 can be played. Bishop a6 attacking the rook, rook goes to f2. So here, of course, black should be looking for a counterplay, and he can only do it with f6, but he can't play this move right now because the bishop on the knight on g6 is hanging by the bishop. That's why he plays knight h8. But that was another mistake, and this is where Garry is already prepared for a tactical strike. What do you think? What move did he play in this position? He played... Actually, you may pause the video and find it yourself. But okay, let's continue. He played bishop g5. Even without calculating lines, it's obvious that this sacrifice definitely deserves our attention. It was not the only move to play in this position. For example, if you can't calculate it, you can just play h4. And the pawn is under attack, he has to take, but then queen g4, f5, e captures en passant, knight f6, knight f6, rook f6, rook f6, queen f6, and after queen e4, we have a double attack. We attack this rook and the h7 square. Now, of course, rook moves, but we play queen h7 and start a deadly attack. We can't play rook to f1 right now because of the bishop there, but it's still a strong attack. However, Garry sacrifices a piece, h takes g5, queen h5, and f5. It doesn't make sense to capture en passant because this is how we allow black to join more pieces to the defense, but we can play knight g5, and in this position the only option for black is to play rook f7, so to allow white to capture. Because if, for example, he moves the rook to d8, then we can capture on f5 with our rook, e takes f5, bishop b3 check, and on the next move we checkmate with knight h7. If, for example, instead he moves the rook there to be able to block on c4, we can play queen h7, king f8, knight e6, queen e6, and after bishop f5 the game is over. Bishop d7 is the next move, the king is under attack. If it's not a checkmate, then at least we gain much material. That's why rook f7 was the only move, and Simon Palatnik found it. But the position is already lost. Garry continues his attack, sacrificing one more piece, bishop f5. If, for example, e captures on f5, then knight d5, queen goes back, and after e6 the game is over. For example, rook e7, queen h7, king f8, and rook f5 with the deadly attack. That's why here he has to capture with the rook. But rook takes rook, e takes f5, and knight d5. We do the same thing, but we traded a rook pair, what was in black favor, of course. That's why the game continued for several moves more. Queen e8, queen h7, king f8, queen takes f5. What to do? For example, something like that wouldn't work. We have several ideas of what to play, but the best option is to deliver a check, king g8 and queen g6. And now, to be able to get rid of the mating threat, he has to sacrifice the queen, either here or here. That's why instead of playing knight f7, black played king g8 in this position. Queen h7 check, king goes there, and looks like we don't have enough material to checkmate. What do you think white should do? You may pause the video and find it yourself. What do you think? What move Garry Kasparov played in this position? Garry understood that it's time to join the rook to the attack, and he plays rook a3 with unstoppable rook f3. Rook c8 was played, rook f3, knight f6. How to continue? We of course can capture on f6, but if we play such a move, then queen e1 is coming. No, we can't. So maybe we can capture with the knight, but if so, I think something like rook c1, king f2, so there are many complications there. And Garry decided to avoid them. He played a quiet move h3. His idea was just to escape with the king after rook c1 check, and this is how he could continue the attack. Queen g6. Another tactical strike by Garry Kasparov. Here he plays rook f6. Rook captures knight. Bishop takes f6. Knight e6 check. The only square for the king is e8. Then knight f6. And in this position it's almost a checkmate. Black has to sacrifice the queen. He plays this move, e takes f6. And it's already a winning position, but also black loses this knight. He has to play knight f7, but even this doesn't work because of queen g8, king d7, queen takes f7. So this is how Garry won that game with a deadly attack. So Garry provoked his opponent to weaken his position with h6 g5, and then just prepared for a sacrifice on g5. Then he sacrificed another piece, bishop f5, and finally he noticed that he is able to join the last piece to the attack. You see, these two pieces, his rook and bishop, didn't participate in the game. That's why Garry's idea to sacrifice the piece and expose the king was really good. Okay. Thank you.
Bobby Fischer invented increment. This is a timing method that we get used to nowadays. A specified amount of time is added to the player's main time each move, unless the player's main time ran out before they completed their move. For example, 3 plus 2 means that 2 seconds are added after each move. What else did Bobby Fischer create? He invented Chess 960 or Fischer Random Chess. It's a new variation of chess that employs the same board and pieces as standard chess. But the starting position of the pieces of the player's home rank is randomized, following certain rules. This random setup makes your opening preparation useless, and you have to rely on your own spontaneous talent and creativity over the board. In this video you learned about Garry Kasparov, Soviet and Russian Grandmaster. I am absolutely sure that Garry Kasparov deserved the title of the best player of all time, but before taking the final decision, we should also observe 2 more candidates. Thank you for watching this video and make sure to like it, subscribe to my YouTube channel and share it with your friends chess players. I hope you enjoyed this video and like his second best game, but if you want to look at the analysis of Garry's best and the most brilliant game, watch the video on the screen next, where I review the game between Garry Kasparov and Vasily Topalov. Okay, don't miss my next video about Vishy Anand. Enjoy Garry's best game and I'll see you there in a moment.